This guide covers all the actions the Black Mage learns from level 51 to 90, including how each action is meant to be used and recommendations when necessary. We also go over the rotation at level 60, 70 and 80. The guide finishes with a level 90 specific guide covering opener, rotation, 2-minute bursts and stat priorities. I will assume you know the basics of the job, and if that is not the case, refer to my Black Mage starter guide to get caught up. I will also assume you are acquainted with common abbreviations and concepts such as GCD, OGCD, slide casting and weaving, and refer to these 3 shorts on the subject if you need a refresher. Now then, at level 52, you learn the ability Ley Lines, which places down a circle on the floor around you. While standing in the circle, your cast times are reduced significantly, enabling you to cycle through your rotation much faster. You should make a point to use this buff as often as you can, but make sure to pick your spots, so you don't risk having to choose between damage output and not eating a boss mechanic. A good time to use Ley Lines is the weaving opportunity as you switch between Astral Fire and Umbral Ice. At level 54, you learn the ability Sharpcast, which makes the next random proc chance guaranteed to occur immediately upon casting the relevant spell. Notably, this applies to Thunder and Fire 1 to activate Firestarter or Thundercloud when you want it. I recommend using it as close to on cooldown as possible. Weave it after either Blizzard 3, Fire 3 or one of the instant casts from your procs to avoid losing damage output to the animation lock. While a Thundercloud proc is slightly better than a Firestarter proc, in most situations, simply using Sharpcast and making the most of whatever proc you do get is better than sitting on it and trying to make sure you proc the right thing. At level 56, you learn the trait Enochian, which simply increases all damage you do while either Astral Fire or Umbral Ice is active. This affects all of your spells, so you should make sure to enter Astral Fire or Umbral Ice before you cast anything else in combat now, including Thunder. Additionally, casting Fire 2 while in Astral Fire now boosts the potency of Flare until you swap out of Astral Fire. You already cast a few Fire 2s per Astral Fire state before Flare, so this does not really change your AoE rotation. At level 58, you learn the spell Blizzard 4, which is only usable in Umbral Ice state, and replaces Blizzard 1 as your single target filler. Additionally, using Blizzard 4 grants 3 Umbral Hearts, which while in the Astral Fire state, negates the MP cost increasing effect of Astral Fire. As such, at least one Blizzard 4 should be used in every Umbral Ice state. Keep in mind that, like Freeze, Blizzard 4 does not refresh the duration of Umbral Ice. In this guide, I will continue to use Blizzard 1 instead of 4 as the filler GCD to make it easier to follow when it is used as extra filler. Speaking of Freeze, it is upgraded to also grant 3 Umbral Hearts on use, so the AoE rotation is similarly extended to always include at least one Freeze cast. Every fire spell in Astral Fire spends 1 Umbral Heart to negate this MP cost increase. However, when used on Flare specifically, it instead only costs 2/3 of all your MP rather than all of it. However, Flare also always spends all of your Umbral Hearts, regardless of however many you have. For single target, this mostly results in being able to stay in Astral Fire state for longer. For AoE, in your Astral Fire state, you should only cast Fire 2 until you have 1 Umbral Heart left, after which you should cast Flare twice. At level 60, you learn the spell Fire 4, which is only usable in Astral Fire state and replaces Fire 1 as the spammed spell on single target. However, Fire 4 does not refresh the Astral Fire state, and so, usually, you only have enough time to cast 3 or 4 Fire 4s before you have to cast Fire 1 to refresh the buff. Due to your MP limitations, entering Astral Fire with 3 Umbral Hearts and full MP, you have enough MP for 6 Fire 4s, 1 Fire 1, as well as MP for Thunder 3 if you need to reapply it normally. As you no longer cast Fire 1 very much, you can save the Firestarter proc until either you need to move, if you need to refresh the Astral Fire state a second time for some reason, or as the final spell before switching to Umbral Ice. In the same vein, due to the significantly higher potency value of Fire 4, it is no longer as important to cast Thundercloud procs for the upfront damage, and so you should keep the procs for movement or to reapply it if the dot or the proc itself is about to run out. You can also simply choose to apply Thunder at specific intervals where it fits. If you exit Astral Fire with both a Thundercloud proc and a Firestarter proc, you can make use of a so-called Transpose Line for a slight damage gain. Use Blizzard 3 and 4 as you normally would. Then use Thundercloud and either immediately if your MP is already maxed out, or when it maxes out, use Transpose and then immediately use the Firestarter proc. This is an advanced trick that, performed multiple times over the course of a fight, can add up. The trick does not specifically require a Thundercloud proc, but notably requires a free and instant spell. Since level 50, you have learned Ley Lines and Sharpcast, which both are recommended to be weaved pretty much on cooldown. Enochian also means you should always start fights by entering Astral Fire or Umbral Ice. Blizzard 4 also both improves the value of your Umbral Ice state and extends your Astral Fire state, and Fire 4 greatly adjusts your rotation in general. For an opener, use Sharpcast up to 12 seconds before fighting begins. Then 3 seconds before, use Ley Lines followed by Fire 3, then Thunder 3, and then use Fire 4 until you're low on time. Then use Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, and then use Thunder 3 to spend the Thundercloud proc. If necessary, fill with Blizzard 4 and then get back into Fire state. Your filler rotation into Umbral Ice is generally to use Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, and either an additional Blizzard 4 or Thunder 3 to be sure you have full MP before you switch. Into Astral Fire, you start with Fire 3, then 3 or 4 Fire 4s, 1 Fire 1, and then more Fire 4s. You can use Thunder 3 whenever the dot is about to run out. If you happen to end up with both a Thundercloud and Firestarter proc together, you can exit the Umbral Ice state by using Thunder 3, Transpose, and then Fire 3 for a slight damage gain. For AoE, use Blizzard 2, Thunder 2, consider using Sharpcast beforehand. Freeze, then 3 Fire 2s and then 2 Flares, and then repeat. At level 62, you learn the ability Between the Lines. As long as Ley Lines are up, you can use this ability to teleport back to them. You can combine it with Ethereal Manipulation to jump quickly to safety and then return to the Ley Lines once it's safe again. At level 64, Thunder 2 is permanently upgraded to Thunder 4. This increases its damage slightly, but does not change your rotation. At level 66, you learn the ability Triplecast, which enables you to cast 3 spells instantly back to back. Triplecast can hold up to 2 charges, so you can both use it just once for 3 spells and keep one for mobility, or you can use both, one at a time, to cast 6 spells instantly in a row. You can even add Swiftcast to the chain to cast 7 spells back to back. If you have both Swiftcast and Triplecast active at the same time, then Swiftcast is always spent first. For an all-out opener, you can adjust to make use of both Triplecasts. Open with Sharpcast, then Fire 3, Thunder 3, and then use Triplecast. Then use Fire 4, weaving Ley Lines, then 2 more Fire 4s, then weave Swiftcast and cast another Fire 4, weaving Triplecast again. Then use Flare, weaving Mana Font, Fire 4 again, and then Flare again, and finish with Blizzard 3 and go back to our normal rotation. For AoE, you can make use of Triplecast for 2 instant flares, followed by Mana Font into another instant flare. Use the Thundercloud Thunder 4 after the 3rd Fire 2 to make space to weave Triplecast here. At level 70, your elemental gauge is expanded with the Polyglot timer. Every 30 seconds of being in a state at all, you are given a Polyglot. You can hold only 1 Polyglot, but the timer will keep ticking, meaning clever timing lets you use 2 Polyglots in quick succession. Making use of Transpose while not being able to attack lets you keep the timer ticking out of combat. You also learn the spell Foul, which costs 1 Polyglot and does AoE damage with a cast time. Similar to Scathe, Foul is unaffected by both Umbral Ice and Astral Fire. Unlike Scathe, Foul actually does great damage and should be used in the Umbral Ice state when available. This means for your general rotation that you should use Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, and usually Foul or Thunder 3 in every Umbral Ice state. Due to the amount of spells in each Umbral Ice state, you should now always have full MP by the time you run out of things to do and move to Astral Fire. You should reliably be able to opt to only cast Thunder 3 when it needs to be reapplied now, regardless of whether that is in Umbral Ice or Astral Fire. Since level 60, your Umbral Ice state has been expanded with the Foul cast, and your opener has been boosted by having access to Triplecast, letting you make your way through your MP much faster at the start of a fight. You can save Triplecast for mobility in a tough spot. Between the Lines lets you easily return to your Ley Lines in case you get forced out of them. To make use of your Triplecasts in an opener, use Sharpcast up to 12 seconds before fighting begins. Then use Fire 3, Thunder 3, then Triplecast. Then use Fire 4, weaving Ley Lines. 2 more Fire 4s, weaving Swiftcast followed by another Fire 4 and weave Triplecast. Then use Flare, weaving Mana Font, another Fire 4 and another Flare, and then begin your Umbral Ice state. At level 72, you learn the spell Despair, which is a single target version of Flare. As such, every Astral Fire state on 1 or 2 targets should be ended with Despair. For your opener, simply replace the flares with Despair for a significant damage gain. At level 74, Sharpcast's cooldown is cut in half, enabling you to use Sharpcast more often. You should still try to weave it whenever it is available, so this doesn't change much. At level 76, you learn the spell Umbral Soul, which is only usable while in Umbral Ice state. When used, it increases your Umbral Ice by 1 stage and generates 1 Umbral Heart. When there is downtime in a fight, or running between battles, use Transpose to switch to Umbral Ice, and then repeatedly use Umbral Soul to keep the state up, and also to max out your Umbral Heart to get a more explosive start when engaging again. At level 80, Foul's cast time is made instant. You can now also hold 2 Polyglots at a time. And you also learn the spell Xenoglossy, which is a single target alternative to Foul. You should use Xenoglossy on 1 or 2 targets, and Foul on 3 or more targets. If you remember the Transpose line from level 60, you can use Xenoglossy in place of a Thundercloud proc, meaning you only need Firestarter to perform it now. For AoE, Foul is now instant, so it can be used for weaving in the same way that Thundercloud can. Since level 70, the biggest upgrade to your rotation is the addition of Despair, both for your opener and every single one of your Astral Fire states. Shorter cooldown on Sharpcast also makes the rotation more consistent, and Umbral Soul helps immensely with downtime. Xenoglossy and Instant Foul also greatly improves your mobility and flexibility in your rotation, not to mention having a second Polyglot slot. These can be used to produce an opportunity to weave abilities whenever you need to. Aside from replacing Flare with Despair in your opener, the exact sequence is entirely unchanged. At level 82, Fire 2 and Blizzard 2 are upgraded to High Fire 2 and High Blizzard 2 respectively, increasing their potencies. While High Blizzard 2 does more damage than Freeze, you should still use Freeze for the Umbral Hearts of course. At 5 or more targets, in a prolonged fight, you can choose to use High Fire 2 2 additional times before using a single flare, as this will amount to more damage. However, it takes longer to perform. If, on the other hand, you are planning to use Triplecast or Swiftcast for AoE, then Double Flare is still superior. At level 84, Mana Font's cooldown is reduced to only 2 minutes. This does not change your rotation, but does let you use this ability more often. At level 86, you learn the ability Amplifier, which instantly grants you a Polyglot. This should be used on cooldown as much as possible. In your opener, weave this just before ley lines. At level 88, Sharpcast is upgraded to now hold 2 charges. This mainly enables you to be more relaxed about weaving Sharpcast. However, weaving it whenever you can make use of it is still recommended. If you can, try to plan it so that Sharpcast is used leading up to Thunder, as it is the superior option to spend it on. At level 90, your elemental gauge is expanded with the Paradox marker. Whenever you enter Umbral Ice from Astral Fire 3 specifically, or enter Astral Fire from Umbral Ice 3 with 3 Umbral Hearts, you get the Paradox marker. The Paradox marker is spent on the new spell Paradox, which replaces both Blizzard 1 and Fire 1 when it is available. Paradox replaces the single Fire 1 cast you would normally cast anyway in Astral Fire. In Umbral Ice, Paradox is an instant spell and also does significantly more damage than even Blizzard 4. This means that it is recommended to use Ice Paradox whenever it is available on up to 3 targets. With more targets than that, it can still be helpful as an instant attack while on the move, or if there is a priority target. Since you have plenty to do in Umbral Ice, this enables you to not use Xenoglossy or Thundercloud as a filler in Umbral Ice, so you can focus entirely on using Thundercloud to reapply Thunder when needed, and Xenoglossy can be used for bursting, mobility, or flexibility when you need to weave something. It should be noted that Umbral Ice is still the best time to spend Polyglots if you can plan it out that way. Paradox can also be used to perform the Transpose Line trick, using Paradox, Transpose, and then Firestarter Fire 3. During downtime, you can produce a Paradox marker by switching to Ice, using Umbral Soul up to 3 times, then Transpose. Transpose again and use Umbral Soul 2 more times to be as prepared as possible when fighting begins again. To round off, let's first talk about an opener followed by general rotation, as well as how this works with the 2-minute burst. And finally, let's touch on stat priorities on gear. Notably, as Black Mage's burst heavily relies on putting mobility options on a pyre of damage gains, if you actually need these mobility options, it may be better to deviate from an all-out burst in the opener or 2-minute burst to save whichever cooldowns you need. With that said, let's begin. Up to 12 seconds before combat starts, use Sharpcast. Then 3 seconds before combat starts, begin casting Fire 3, then use Thunder 3 and then use Triplecast. This will clip your GCD, that is intended. Then use Fire 4, and if you intend to use a tincture, a so-called burst potion, this is the time. Another Fire 4, weaving both Amplifier and Ley Lines. Yet another Fire 4, weaving Swiftcast, followed by another Fire 4, weaving Triplecast. Then use Despair, weaving Mana Font, followed by Fire 4, weaving Sharpcast, and then Despair. Then continue into Blizzard 3 and use Xenoglossy, Paradox, Blizzard 4 and finish the opener with Thunder 3. This then leads to the general rotation. The Umbral Ice state should typically include Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4 and Paradox. As Paradox does significantly more damage, it should be prioritized if you are affected by raid buffs, but otherwise it can be used last or if you need to move. Thunder 3 should be used either if the dot is running out on your target or if, somehow, the Thundercloud proc itself is running out. Thundercloud procs can also be used to fill as an instant if you need to move or weave something. Xenoglossy similarly can be used to fill when you need to weave something or need to move. However, due to the sheer power of Xenoglossy, it is very beneficial to stockpile these leading up to raid buffs, assuming you don't need them for anything else. Make sure to weave Sharpcast often so you don't sit on it. It is better to use it whenever it is available than losing out on uses because you're too focused on producing Thundercloud procs with it specifically. Ley Lines and Amplifier should also generally be used on cooldown, and they line up naturally with the 2-minute burst as well. A consistent way to fit them is to plan an instant like Xenoglossy, Thundercloud or even Firestarter around it when you get them. For Mana Font, it should be weaved as soon as possible, but optimally after an instant cast while on 0 MP in Astral Fire state, so that the MP results in Fire 4 and Despair being cast again. Speaking of the Fire state, this should typically include 6 Fire 4s, Paradox and Despair, and Thunder 3 is only used if you need to reapply it. Notably, both Triplecast and Swiftcast are considered damage increasing cooldowns, as they effectively reduce the cast time spent on Fire 4 and Despair, and so if they are not needed for mobility, using them for damage is beneficial. As Triplecast can hold 2 charges, you can stockpile them to make a bigger burst during raid buffs. For Swiftcast, you can use Xenoglossy before Despair in a regular fire state on the odd minute to find space to weave Swiftcast to cast Despair faster. The reason that the 2-minute burst becomes somewhat vague for Black Mages is that while optimally you want to fit as many Xenoglossies, Despairs and Fire 4s in raid buffs as you can, it can vary heavily depending on the fight, where you are in your rotation when raid buffs come up. And you may need to use a lot of tricks to plan out your rotation in a way such that you are in the spot you need to be in when raid buffs come up. This is partly what gives rise to Transpose Lines. I mentioned one a few times throughout this guide, which is the line called AF1 F3P Standard, which is relatively straightforward and always good to use. Another line that can easily be employed to recover from mistakes is if you use Triplecast and you realize one of the instant spells is going to be Blizzard 3, simply use Transpose and Ice Paradox before you cast Blizzard 3 for a slightly smaller loss. There are also lines that lead to Astral Fire states with 4 or 5 Fire 4s and a Despair, but no Paradox, which can be helpful to align your rotation so that you are in just the right spot when raid buffs come up. And there are many more tricks than that. However, for most regular play, they are not needed. So I will leave a link in the description to a guide that goes over it in far more detail for those that are interested. Now, for AoE adjustments, with 3 or more targets, use Sharpcast whenever you enter Umbral Ice, and use Blizzard 2, Thunder 4, and then Freeze. Then 3 Fire 2s followed by 2 Flares. For extra burst, use Sharpcast after the first Fire 2, and then use the Thundercloud proc after the second Fire 2 to weave Triplecast to instant cast Fire 2 and 2 Flares. You can also use Mana Font or even Ethers to add even more Flares. On 5 or more targets, you can replace the first Flare with 2 more Fire 2s for extended fights. Finally, regarding stat priorities. Take note that in nearly every single case, item level beats out optimal secondary stats. This means you should always prioritize gear with higher item level as long as it has intelligence on it. After that, Black Mage has 2 options. Let's start with Fast Mage. For this style, get as much spell speed as you can, then get Determination and Direct Hit after that. Critical Hit is prioritized very low because you never get enough of it to start to really take off. Determination and Direct Hit are almost identical in value, with Determination being a tiny bit better, so given the choice between the two, it should be preferred. Fast Mage gets most of its damage from simply performing the general rotation consistently, and is recommended for less experienced Black Mages as the higher speed also gives you more leeway. Mistakes are less likely to result in dropping state, and you're more likely to be able to sneak in spells where you otherwise wouldn't. The other option is Slow Mage. For this style, you want at least 824 spell speed, a GCD of 2.42. But get enough for your comfort, a GCD of 2.34 is recommended at least. After that, get as much critical hit as you can, and then get Determination and Direct Hit. This style has a higher potential but less consistent damage and relies heavily on non-standard play like Transpose Lines as mentioned earlier, and maximizing raid buffs to excel. I recommend this style to very experienced Black Mages, especially if you play around with Transpose Lines already. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me and my channel, you can make sure to let the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. And if you want to give even more support than that, you can also become a member of the channel like these wonderful people here. Fun fact, at the start of Endwalker, Xenoglossy had a potency of 660 and the final stage of Enochian was 20%. Over the course of the expansion, these have been boosted to 880 potency and 23% respectively, which equates to an around 37% improvement to Xenoglossy alone, not to mention all the other actions boosted by Enochian.